I'm the one that you love to hate. Shake 'em up like a quake. Pop your feelings and turn and dispose them like haters I throw away. I'm forever blessed. Got the spirit that's holy controlling me. I ain't gotta coordinate. I just sit back and buckle my bills and I'm ready to blaze in the stars of my destination. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. All right. What's going on, everyone? This is Tony Mars with the Melted Broadcast. And today we got Michael Kopf from Writing Through the Unknown, the energy that surrounds us, paranormal investigator, speaker, podcaster, Reiki master, author, and researcher, and from the Etalk TV family. What's going on, Michael?
Hey, welcome back. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Readjusting, getting back settled in.
Yeah, I missed your shows.
I appreciate that. I miss doing them. I
Well, we're glad you're back.
appreciate that. So what's been going on with you, man? I see you've been doing a lot of investigating, pumping them shows out every week like usual. What's new?
Well, I just did an investigation, the first one for the year, actually due to weather, last weekend, and been writing books, which I never thought would be in my repertoire, but I'm like surprised myself that I can just sit down and like my last book, book five, I wrote it in a month and got
Book
it published
five?
in a month. Yeah,
And these are available for purchase,
they're on Amazon.com.
like paperbacks, hard
You can get
copies.
paperback, you can get hard copy, and you can get Kindle version.
All right, I'm definitely gonna give me a hard copy today.
Well, I
Put
appreciate it.
put it back here with some other books. Definitely go through it.
Yeah, so while you were off, doing your personal stuff, and I got to commend you for doing that because a lot of people will sit there and say, "No, I got to do the shows first," but you took care of yourself. So I appreciate that and admire that about you and congratulate you for being that role model that says, "Yeah, life comes first."
Thank you.
But so to catch you up with the books, my first four books I called the Awakening series. My illustrator and editor for those books helped me come up with the title. And what it is the first book, they're in no particular order of my life, but so the first book is my paranormal journey. And then the second book is my journey into discovering that I've been in programs and other aspects of my life that I didn't know about. And what I added to the first book, the paranormal book, I gave the origin story to the energy that surrounds us podcast show. And in the second book, I gave the origin story to Writing Through the Unknown podcast because I felt those topics fit what those podcasts are about. And so I was like, I'll put them in there. Then the third book is my metaphysical life journey from growing up and different theories and different aspects of the metaphysical that I grew up with and how it impacted me and what how I saw it and interpret it. And
Yeah.
then the fourth book was a little bit harder for me to write because I took and the last two chapters of the book are pure photographs. And so the book is about my personal life, like where I've traveled to, where, what I did as a kid, what, life was like. But then the second to last chapter is like my life in pictures, where I was like, here's me as a little kid, teenager. growing up, current. And my dad passed in 2023 in June. And so I thought a nice tribute to everybody because he was, a major part of my life. The last, the last chapter in that book is photographs of his life and what he, our lives as a family, his, before we were a family, what he's done. And so it's kind of a tribute to where people who may never have met him
Yeah.
can kind of get a feeling of his life through the photos. Well, being like, oh man, this guy probably would have been really cool to know. I'm sorry I missed the chance. And that's my hope with it. And then book five, I left the series and I'm working on it as a trilogy, and it's going to be Deeper Insights trilogy. And so book five is titled Deeper Insights into the Mind of Michael. And what I did with it was I took different concepts and I broke them into chapters. Like I have a chapter on past lives and genealogy. And I look at it and I go, okay, so what is past lives? What is genealogy? Are they connected? What do they mean? How do they impact us? And so I take the reader through and I go, okay, here are websites or information sources that I used to get this definition. And working from that definition, I then came up with this idea. And then instead of concluding it and saying, this is what it is, I conclude it with, so you are at choice now to say, okay, I accept your findings
Yeah.
and your path. Or if you don't, my hope is you'll go further with it and go, well, there seems to be more. And, go with it and run with it. But I don't answer what it is. And I have other aspects in there to challenge people of like perception versus thought, how those interrelate and are separate and how they impact how we think and view the world. And I even have a chapter where I say truths we blindly accept. And those I propose to people as, are these really truths or do we need to change these truths to fit the new truth that we found today? And one example that I think you'll find really interesting, and I'll start it with a question to you is,
Okay.
what is the moon to you?
The moon, excuse me.
Like, what do you believe about the moon?
I believe it's satellite. Maybe there was placed there by an advanced race for whatever reason. I don't know. And I say that because there's different aspects to it. For example, whenever they landed on it, it seemed hollow from whenever they landed and hit it, and they had that big ring that was echoing. Um, I'm not too sure.
So you actually are more informed than most people because a lot of people are like, well, it's a celestial object that's been in our orbit since the Earth was created. It was a piece of the Earth that broke off, and because that's what we were told in science class in elementary school growing up, that the moon has always been there. Well, I was surprised to do research and find out the Zulu tribes, pre-Columbian tribes,
Yeah.
indigenous tribes, the Greeks, the Romans, all have tales of meeting civilizations that they call pre-lunar, which means before the moon was here. So
No
the
way.
moon was not always in orbit around us, that something brought it in. Like you're saying, races, benevolent races brought it in. And the interesting thing about the moon, too, is we have no satellites around it like we do around the Earth to communicate.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because if we can communicate around the Earth with satellites, we sure can use a satellite that's around the Earth to hit a satellite around the moon and communicate, but that stays dark. And the dark side of the moon that we never see. If it's a
Yeah.
spinning object in space,
Yeah.
we should see all of it, not only half of it. And like you're saying, and they rang it like a bell, which is not a celestial object. It is something created that was brought in. And so and then, and then I would share all of this, and then my last statement to that chapter would, or that section would be like, so what do you think the moon is? Do you believe all these cultures and all this
Yeah.
evidence, or do you believe science told us the truth and it's a piece of the earth and everybody else is just making stuff up or embellishing or whatever the case may be? But
Yeah.
I leave it to the individuals because our history, our stories, everything we're understanding is constantly changing. And so I don't want to lock in and say, this is my belief. Here you go. Here's how I got it. And then, like a month or two later, go, hey, I'm writing an addendum to this section because now I learned this. So now my definition has changed
Yeah.
and my perspective's changed. So I leave it open for that.
I like that. You leave it up to the reader, you kind of put them on this little journey, and whether they want to follow the journey and go down the rabbit hole, they can, or they can or they can't, whether they want to go and do some more research. And it's crazy what you were talking about, about that the Zulu. It kind of reminds me of the Dogon, I believe it was a Dogon tribe, and they were always talking about the third guys that came down were from Sirius B, but at the time, there was only Sirius A, and it wasn't until like 100 years later they discovered it, and it's like, how did they know?
Exactly. And I mean, and the thing that like trips me up somewhat too is when you get a hold of a lot of people and they say UFOs have not been around, they don't really exist. And then we go to Renaissance art, and I cannot explain this. And it's not a Mandela effect, but there is something to it though that I think that I looked at a lot of art, being a history major, and I would see the art for what it is. Now I go back and look at the art and I'm like, there's a freaking UFO in this photo. How did I not see that before? And, or, there's this unexplained object now in this photo that was I'd never seen before. And it's like, it
Yeah,
always amazes me how that happens. And one thing too that I started to realize is, when we, talking about like the ancient Greeks, for example, and they say, oh, Apollo rides a chariot through the sky and, he's the sun god. Well, if I go and I have a UFO that I know now, I can say that's a spaceship. But in ancient Greek times, when they didn't have the notion of space travel as far as we know,
yeah,
how are they going to describe a vehicle in the sky? Well, what vehicles do they have around? they have chariots, they have wagons. Well, the rich people
Dragons.
have chariots. So
Yeah,
could the chariot that Apollo rode be a UFO? Because that's the term that they could put on it. And we forget not every civilization has the knowledge that we have today. So we got to take ourselves back into their language, their understanding, and relook at all the text and all the stories and be like, oh my God, they were writing about aliens or they were writing about unidentified objects because they didn't have a term or an awareness that we have today. And so when you put yourself in their shoes, it's you start to get a different picture of what's being shared and talked about and going, okay, the gods were, extraterrestrials.
and it's just like with the Indian invaders. What do they call them? The Vimanas. The fly machines, and they would come and land, and there was thunder and smoke and all that. I mean, that's a craft.
It is. And I mean, and it's amazing how we sit there and we'll tell, everybody, oh, you're crazy for thinking aliens were here before, and that, that's brand new and everything. But then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Crete where they have this stone archway, like for a doorway, that has all these animals and symbols on it. And there's a T-Rex and a Triceratops on this stone, but yet the dinosaurs were long extinct before this culture was supposedly around. So,
Yeah,
how did they know how to draw a dinosaur? Because the bones weren't discovered until maybe the 17, 1800s. They started discovering bones of dinosaurs and realizing there were larger animals that once lived here.
yeah,
So we're talking pre-modern civilization and even pre-Renaissance age civilization, back to almost Stone Age, which is our most basic age of understanding and relevance, and going, they had awareness of something we did not have awareness of until recently.
yeah,
How?
yeah, and it makes me think too. This could predate back, say for example, like the Stone Age, and they're making these drawings. But then I sit there and I think, how long did it take for them to even develop the knowledge to be able to know that, hey, if I get this and mark it, it's gonna make some color on the wall, and to build a technique to even be able to draw something, what they're seeing. And I've seen some of the pictures that you're talking about as well, but one specifically I remember is it's a figure riding the freaking dinosaur.
Yeah.
And the dinosaurs were around how long ago?
Which I think might have been what inspired Dinotopia. I don't know. I'm just speculating that one. But, another interesting aspect of our world that we don't really fully understand is, I was talking with Barbara Lamb about the Nazca lines.
Yeah,
And these are lines you can only see from being in the air, like in a plane or helicopter. Yet they want us to believe someone walked a line, left no footprints, made no mistakes, and created animals and shapes that were not around or not even indigenous to their area.
Yeah.
So, one, how did they know that? And two, I learned from Barbara that in Chile, which is south of Nazca by a large margin, there is a line that's in the shape of an arrow that points towards the Nazca lines.
Oh, no way.
So, why would there be in Chile another line formation that we don't talk about associated with Nazca? And even the Nazca lines, I find it so fascinating that for like 5 years, it's like everybody was talking about Nazca and the lines. And now hardly anybody talks about them anymore. And it's like, we solve it? No. Do we know what they are? No. But apparently we decided we'll never know, so we just gave up on them. And I kind of have the opinion of they're either formations like I want to say like cities maybe or space stations or something, and but I don't know why they would make them in the shape of like a spider or
Yeah.
an astronaut. That part I don't know why they would make them that way, but I definitely have the feeling if you were to walk in to the Nazca line formation, if your energy is right, I don't think you're going to remain here. You're going to end up
No
somewhere
way.
else.
Like a portal.
Right.
And what's crazy, you bring up the Nazca Lions. We had did the Rendlesham Forest UFO deep dive, and so the dude who had touched the craft, he got all those downloads and was seeing all that binary code. So we had when I started looking all this stuff up, there was like a place in Brazil, of course, Egypt, and one of them was the coordinates to the Nazca Lions, and I thought that's kind of wild.
Yeah, and my first thought was because again, I'm thinking of the world as we see it today, going, why would somebody from space that can travel through time, dimensional space, need an arrow to tell them where the Nazca lines are? And then, and Barbara and I were talking about it, and then I was like, well, you know what? If this was formed in Pangea when it was one continent and then now they've drifted apart, I could see why you would need a line because if you returned and you were like, okay, one continent, got it, I know where to land, no problem. But then you
Yeah,
return and you're like, wait, where's the landmass? The landmass is gone. You'd fly around and go, oh, wait, there's the marker. Oh, there it is. Okay, now we know where it is. And you could find it again. But we naturally just assume, people, recently doing this. And so, again, that's where we got to go back and think prehistory time of, when were they here? And yes, you would need markers. And the one thing that I find interesting is I was watching Josh Gates' show,
I love Josh
and
Gates.
Easter Island is the Moabs are looking the statues at statues on another island in Indonesia, I think it is, or in that area. I forget the name of the island, but nobody ever talks about that.
And they're the similar stones of the giants, like they're
They're
identical.
they're like very similar, almost identical, and they're looking at each other and it's like why would you build even if they were completely different statues, types and everything, Why would you have a statue facing a statue on an island? Of
That's
all
crazy.
things, you could have, facing east, west, north, south, but no, you're have them facing an island that has statues on it. So I kind of agree with Josh that there's got to be a connection. Can we identify it right now? No.
The ultimate
Will
stare
we?
down of the giants.
But I mean, and even looking at the Easter Island statues is, everybody always assumed, oh, it's just the heads. Then
No.
somebody finally excavated and found out the heads have bodies and the bodies are buried in the ground. Well, how much of everything around us, are we blindly accepting that this is what it is? I mean, look at the pyramids. And I'm not talking about the fact that they think water was flowing through the bottom and their power stations. That is a possibility.
Yeah.
But what I'm looking at is we have for decades or even centuries had the concept a pyramid is four-sided with a square bottom until a photographer took a photo, published it, and somebody looked at that photo and said, wait a minute, pyramids are eight-sided with a
Yeah.
square bottom. How did the Egyptians have the technology to make a straight line through stacked stone that would be an illusion to where you do not see this line?
Yep. Unless it's from an aerial view.
No, actually, it has to be the sun at a certain angle because then
Okay.
it
Yeah, the
creates the
shadows.
shadows. And I was thinking about, when I looked at that, I was like, where else does that appear in this world? And I couldn't help but go Machu Picchu, where the sun creates a shadow that goes down the serpent
Oh
side,
yeah.
and that's their calendar. And going, these people knew how the sun operated in a way we don't. And they were more advanced, I think, than we are today with their building technologies, their understanding of laying things out, and everything is lined up to constellations. No, sorry, constellations. And what's interesting to me about it is, you could sit there and go, well, everybody looks up and sees the stars, so you can line up and, everything. But they're lined up to a specific constellation. So it's not just a random thing. It is a very precise.
Why do you think that is? That they have them lined up like that to these constellations, star systems?
I think it's, like it's a colony. If you think about, if you were to build a colony on another world from where you came from, what would you do? You would build it to remind yourself where you come from and in a
Yeah.
way that pays homage to your home, that you're like, this is who we are. So it would be built to represent that. And so that's my thoughts on that. And what blew my mind is when I was in Egypt, the Sphinx is literally right in front of the pyramids of the Giza Plateau, which
Yeah.
every photo I always saw the Sphinx, it was in barren desert, nothing around it. And so I was like, that's not true. Those are photoshopped, if anything.
Really? All the photos that they have on the internet right now? Because I know what you're talking about. Like it was, looks like that in the pictures. So you're saying
There,
in real life, it's positioned in front.
it's in front of and lower than the pyramids. But yeah, they are next to each other. Like literally, you could walk from one to the other.
What? That's wild.
And here's the other thing. It took me a while to line up, but when you see photographs of the Egyptian pyramids, you always see three, right?
Yeah.
there's nine. There are six smaller pyramids right clustered in with them, but and I was talking with my friend going, how in the world are, these excluded? And he just looked at me and he goes, line up your picture. You can make it look like whatever you want. And so I walked around
Mm.
and I was looking and I finally found this one angle and I was like, this is the history books. It shows only three pyramids, but
No way.
there are six more and they are all aligned to and with the constellation. And so I find it like so amazing that we have all these stories and all these histories and all these legends that we just look at and go, okay, and nobody goes there and says, wait a minute, we need to change this because this is not true.
Yeah.
We just go, okay, and we just continue to ignore what's right in front of us. And one thing that I heard Laura Eisenhower talk about that got me thinking about something, and I did a little video you know, about history is, the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. Nobody can identify where really it is. There's a lot of speculation around different sites that, is attributed to, but we don't really know. And they were like the gold standard. And so I started thinking about it and going, well, literary license aside, the way they were acting, the way that their story is and what they represented, I started thinking, Laura's right. There's more to it. And she took it to the Zodiac, and I was like, it is lined up with the Zodiac. It doesn't matter which nights you talk about around the round table, they all have different ties to the Zodiac. And so I started thinking, well, if these people were really in history and knowing what we know today, like, hybrids being around, could these knights have been hybrids? And that's why they were selected to be at this table.
Yeah.
And I took and I said, well, if these zodiacs match these elements, well, what seed cultures represent those elements? And then I was like, so here are the possibilities of who these knights could have been hybrids of. They could have been Lyran, they could have been Arcturian, they could have been, and
That's
took it a
wild.
step further. And I was talking with Laura at a conference and I mentioned it to her, and she says, oh, thank you for reminding me. I keep forgetting to put that in my presentation. So she had even had that thought. And so I was like, that got validated. And it's amazing how once you start going down rabbit hole and seeing more to a story, how many more things that are going on in our world that we are able to do that and that we sit there and go, well, yeah, this is the surface story, but if we peel back the surface, what's underneath there?
Yeah.
How far can we go with that? And that's another thing that I did in the books is, I'm like, hey, we're going down rabbit holes. I'm going to stop my rabbit hole search here for now for the purpose of this book, but you're welcome to go on and keep going down if you want, or, you could stop two levels ahead of where I'm at. But that's the beauty of rabbit holes is you go as far as you want to go. You don't have to go to the bottom because personally, I don't know that we'll ever get to the bottom of any of the rabbit holes mysteries that we have around our world because I feel like if once we hit the bottom, what's the point anymore? It's like
Yeah,
we have that quench for knowledge that we all want and need and that knowing, and so once you have it, it's like, well then now what do I do?
that's kind of how I feel about, disclosure. Like I wanted so bad for them to come out, just tell the truth, if there really is a truth. But then I got to sit back and look at it, like, damn, of all this stuff is real and all these things that people talk about and see are really happening and are really there. Like, what else is there? Well, no, as far as like for me anymore, this is stuff that, I spend a lot of time thinking about and researching. It's a passion of mine. And then I think about, well, they just come out like everything is real. And there's like, well, what next? It's not like you go get one of these alien beings and sit him in a chair and let's have a podcast.
Well, actually, you might find surprising that you probably have and didn't know that you had.
Do you think you have at one point?
I think I might have on a couple of times, come across, different hybrids or different cultures, but I think the misnomer that I feel like I personally has stopped using is that disclosure hasn't happened yet or isn't happening because in talking with a lot of my guests, disclosure's been happening for years. We just don't see it as disclosure because we all have created this picture of what disclosure is going to look like. And so we've narrowed our focus. It's like we've tunnel vision to
Yeah,
disclosure is going to be a UFO coming down out of the sky, and a culture is going to come out and say, "Hi, we're here to help you. This is who we are." And that may happen, but that's not the disclosure.
yeah,
The disclosure is like we're talking and, sharing information and bringing new awareness of ideas.
yeah, for
That's the
sure.
disclosure. We're growing. Our minds are expanding. We're no longer looking at the world and going, okay, I got green grass outside and, these nice trees. And so my day is, the sun's out. It's a perfect day. I'm good. Well, okay, but I would say to them, how do you know the grass is green? Well, that's because it's green colored. Well, how do you know that's green? That color is green. And this goes into one of the things I was talking about in my book as a truth that we blindly accept that we have been told grass is green.
Yeah,
And yes, science says it's reflecting back all the frequencies of green and absorbing the rest, but how do we know that frequency is green and not purple or not red or color at all?
yeah. It's crazy because I think about that too. What if it's really blue? And all our lives they told us it was this color.
And I go, and if we look at it as the matrix, if we see everything as a frequency code, it's going to be less aesthetic and less pretty to look outside and go, yeah, looking at the frequency code of green grass and plants and trees and fences and houses, in the sky. And all you see is, like, for the example, the Matrix code in Matrix, where Neo finally reveals, what it really looks like. Well, the world lost a lot of beauty, in my opinion, when he discovered that because everything is the same. It's just coded numbers flowing or coded frequency working. And
Yeah,
so I say in the book, like, when I talk about the grass being green, I'm like, I know the grass may not be green, but I'm going to accept for aesthetics that it is green. And so that's a truth I'm okay with blindly accepting and being okay with because it makes the world more enjoyable. And so it was my way of saying to the readers, we don't have to undo all the myths and all the blind truths and reveal what they really are. We can accept some and keep some blind truths,
yeah,
and that's okay. We don't have to make the entire world a factual world. We can make it what we want. And if it has green grass that looks like what we think green looks like, I'm okay with that because that makes it more aesthetic and more pretty to look at than
yeah,
coded going by. And so there are things in the world that, yes, we need to, in my opinion, change our viewpoint of, but not everything. I mean, and another example, and I'm not trying to get controversial or, flagged by, everybody, this is just my opinion. The world having different skin tones, different and having male, female genders makes the world more diverse and livable than if we all look the same. If we all look the same, then I think we would get bored
yeah,
and feel like there would be no point to exist. But because we all have these minute differences, it's like, ooh, I want to learn why did your skin tone turn out that way, or what was the purpose of this, the two genders. And I, I'm sorry, but to me, there's only two genders. I don't mean to discredit anybody, but it's been that way since the beginning. The world makes sense with that, and
yeah,
I don't understand what all the different ones mean, and I haven't really felt the need to sit down. So I'll be honest, if there is, a real reason behind it, and by real I mean a documentable, actual, then I'd be like, okay, I'll change my viewpoint. But if it's just because I don't want to be male and I don't want to be female,
yeah,
I'm going to make myself this. That's your choice, but you don't have the right to make us, you know, have to learn your choice and make your choice a reality. That's your own reality.
yeah,
And so that's where I think the beauty of where we're going with this, the disclosure is we're all making our own world the way we want it. And so if I want a world like with this background, as an example, I asked for a dimensional forest, with a path. Well, because of where I'm sitting, you don't see the path, but here I'll move for a second and there it is. I
okay.
created that through AI. And so I can create that as my existence and be like, that's the world I want to live in. So
It looks so
that's
realistic.
it does. And you can have, you could have the reality of like you have your stuff behind you, your accolades, your art that you like, and that's your reality. And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
I'm not making you pick my reality. You're not making me pick your reality.
I'm not saying
We're
Michael
living in
put Star Trek
harmony.
stuff back there.
Yeah. I mean, we're living in harmony and balanced, and we're not forcing anything on, another. And that's where I think all these different arguments that they're trying to create and say, this is who I am, you lose ground to me when you are trying to force people to believe what you believe.
Yeah.
That was never how this world was meant to be and how our environment works.
What's going on,
And I
everyone?
hate that
It's Tony Mars
whenever,
with the Melted Broadcast. If you or anyone you know would like to come on the show and talk about your experience, maybe you've experienced the paranormal, maybe you've been studying ancient history or the forbidden knowledge all your life, maybe you're a spiritual teacher. If you would like to come on the show, you can reach me at themeltedbroadcast@gmail.com or hit us up on the website at www.themeltedbroadcast.com. Peace.
You're right. We have a news media outlet that is one-sided. They're both one-sided in actuality, in my opinion. There is no unbiased news anymore. And so I just tune it out. But everybody has their agenda. And that's where we have to look at the source and go, what is your agenda? Is your agenda sharing truth? Then I'll listen. If your agenda is to make me believe what you believe is true, I'm going to tune you out because I'm open-minded, but like you're saying, I'm open-minded. I'm open to new ideas, new concepts. I like when my core beliefs and values are challenged and everything, but in order for my core values and beliefs to change or your core values, beliefs and to change, it's up to us. Meaning I can only change mine, you can only change yours. I can't go up to you and go, "Hey, Tony, the core belief you have on this is totally wrong. You really need to get on board with this truth because my truth is not your truth."
yeah. And that's something
And
that a lot of
so,
people in religion do. And nothing against religion, you know, I'm fine with all of it. But, it's the same thing. If you don't believe this, they're like, no, that's wrong. This is the truth. You gotta believe this. This is the true God. And that's one thing that I was, it bugs me.
yeah. And, you know, if we took religion, the religions of the world, and we took and take them down to their basic, take all the rhetoric and all the dogma and everything out of it and go and look at what the core of all the religions are, you would find they're probably most likely, because it's been a while since I've looked at it, since I did my term paper on this, they're all the same. They all
Yeah.
have a book that they believe is the book, the word of their God. They all have a place of worship. They all have, this hierarchy. But what's missing from it all is the unity. It's all divisive. It's all about division. And by that I mean the Jewish people. I have Jewish friends, and one of the things that kind of struck me that I see in TV and movies, and I say, is this real? They're like, yeah, it kind of is, but we're slowly getting out of it. Is Jewish people were to marry Jewish people. You did not marry outside of your faith.
I didn't know that.
And I always thought that was so strange. But then you look at other religions and other cultures, and that's in there, as well. And it's like, well, that only serves to keep us apart. It doesn't serve to unite us. And so
Yeah.
why do we have to be divided and not united? What's the threat of that? And what amazes me too is, for years I would say like Mary Magdalene is not who the Bible says she is, and everybody would be like, "Oh, yes, she is. You're so full of it. You are, you don't know what you're talking about." And I would go and I would look at, when I was a little kid, my parents were shocked when I made this realization. And it was a simple realization that is the basis of Catholicism. With it being Easter time, it's kind of funny that this is coming up, but Jesus died on the cross to abolish sin,
Yeah. And I know where you're going.
resurrected, and, ascended to heaven. How, if he died on the cross to abolish sin, does sin still exist?
I
So
literally,
therefore, he
I
died for
yeah,
nothing.
I had this
And
conversation like a week ago with my coworker.
I actually, I was in a Bible study and I was, pointing this out and going, abolish means it no longer exists. So how does this still exist after this point? And they're like, well, it's a different sin. I was like, yeah, no, if you're going to use the word sin, it can't count because he
Not a
didn't sit there
specific
and
sin.
say, I didn't die for this sin. I died for sin. And then I said, well, Jesus had his feet washed by Mary. Well, Mary's not his mom, and under Jewish law, only a wife can wash a man's feet. So
I didn't know that either.
they have to be married. And they're like, no. And then I said, okay, we'll save that argument for later. And then I said, okay, you say Jesus is a rabbi, yeah? Under Jewish law, only a married man can have the title rabbi. There is no honorary titles back then. So who did he marry? Well, he didn't marry anybody. Can't be a rabbi then. And so and what I've found is a lot of the Christians don't understand Hebrew law. And I'm talking the ancient times Hebrew law that existed in the time that all this took place.
Yeah.
And if you understand the laws, then you go back and you look at the stories. Mary Magdalene was the one who was always by Jesus' side, always doing the duties of the wife, so to speak, that as we would interpret them. And what surprised me is to learn in some of the books that the testaments that were removed from the Bible and the Council of Nicaea, Mary Magdalene was the money source. She was the one who afforded Jesus and the apostles to do their travels, to do their work. Nobody sits there and thinks about, how did they afford to get from place to place, to eat, to drink, to have
Yeah.
clothes.
So I have a question, Michael. Do you believe that Jesus was really executed on the cross, crucified?
You know, that's that question is like a double-edged sword in my world because yes, there was someone executed on the cross, and it very well could have been him, but I also know he had a bloodline and had kids,
Yep.
and there's stories of him being in France with Mary Magdalene.
Yes. Yep. That's what I was getting at.
But the one thing about the stories that's missing is when did Mary and Jesus leave? Was it after the resurrection? In which case, the story of him going back up into heaven, maybe, he didn't go back up to heaven. Maybe he left and went to France, but that didn't serve the church, so the church made him go to heaven. And Mary Magdalene just disappears. And in reality, once the resurrection happens, so does Jesus. Jesus disappears from the Bible until Revelations. So, what's he doing? Is he just hanging out in the clouds having a party? Or, is he living, a life and finishes his life out and dies and,
Because there's a big gap, is there, from I forget what age as when he's a kid.
there's
Maybe,
30 years of missing from
yeah,
his childhood.
30 years. And then I know there's a book that talks about it. Billy Carson talks about it all the time. I
The
think it's
Book
like,
of Enoch.
well, not that one, but
Oh,
I just finished reading that one. And I think it's called like the Gospel of the Holy 12 or 11 or something like that. He said it's a very rare book to find, but it talks about all this missing time and like where he went, to go learn from the Tibetan monks and to
yeah.
Egypt to the mystery schools and all this. It's like how come they don't show us that? Like, why take that out the Bible? If they're gonna talk about Jesus, I mean, I wanna hear the whole story. I want to hear everything he did, the whole shebang.
So the reason is because the religion, like Catholicism, this is going to shock a lot of people, but it was a matriarchal religion until the Council of Nicaea. Then it flipped and became patriarchal. So any story or any book that celebrated the female was erased from history to the Bible. And they needed stories to make sense because, a lot of their stories are very similar to paganism. So they had to, they were borrowing and interchanging, but in order for it to make sense, well, one of the things you have to do is you got to have a person to blame to make fear and and put people into a control system.
Yeah.
Hence, Judas Iscariot was created as the betrayer, the traitor. And when we think about it, he was venerated before Mary was venerated, and they found, proof that he did commit the treason. He did commit the traitorous act, but he was asked to do it. He didn't voluntarily sell his soul for, I think, what was it, 25 pieces of eight or silver. He literally was like, "No, I can't." And Jesus was like, "You're the strongest one of us. You're the only one who can do it." And he did it. And he was remorseful and, sacrificed himself because, of it. But that's a much different story than he betrayed Jesus and they hung him as a traitor, because that story puts people into a framework of, I don't want to be a Judas. I don't want to
Yeah.
be the traitor to the faith and betray, my faith. And all these examples of all these stories that are in the Bible are really designed to not empower the person, but to enslave the person.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, I mean, and I know somebody's going to say, well, look at Job. Job, stood up for God. But I can honestly say, I do not really honestly believe that there's a God who would say, kill your family to prove your loyalty to me.
Yeah,
That does not sound like a God, that's out there to be unconditional. And that's the thing too, is the Bible has two gods. People don't realize this.
yes,
Old Testament God is, you piss me off, I'm going to wipe you out. New Testament God is, well, you pissed me off, but you're only human. You make mistakes, so you learned from it. We're good.
I
All's
have,
good. All's forgiven.
so
And
I have a
so
question with that. So do you think, just like you mentioned, the two different gods and the two different versions of these Bibles, do you think they're actually really two different people?
I think they were. And one of the things, too, that people don't realize that kind of corroborates this is when you really look at the Bible, and I mean, I'll be honest and transparent, I haven't read it from cover to cover. But all the stories that I've heard of it and from talking with people, the only time like Satan appears is the New Testament. He's not in the Old Testament. Who's the God of the Old Testament? He's pretty much is acting like the devil. He's, and saying, you made these mistakes, you're paying with your life. You're this town, you don't want to listen to me. You're not going to do what I tell you to do. I'm wiping this town out.
Yeah,
Well, who does that sound like in the Bible? And all of a suddenly Jesus is born, walks his path, does his job, and leaves the story. And all of a suddenly God is, well, I'm here to help you live a better life and a more divine life. And we got to battle the forces of the Satan and the evil ones. And Satan was never even in the original Bible. He came later. And people
another scare
don't
tactic.
realize that. Exactly. And even more so is, and this is a question that I cannot believe for the 2000 plus years that Christianity has been around, nobody has figured this sentence out. And that is Adam and Eve, let's forget Lilith for a moment, the original female.
Yep.
We're going to say Adam and Eve, okay. Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel are the only four people on the earth. What does Cain and Abel do? They marry women of other tribes. What other tribes? Where did these tribes come from? Because there's only four people on the planet. So how all of a suddenly we're being told these four people left the Garden of Eden, they have kids,
Yeah.
they're the only people on the planet, but all of a suddenly these two other tribes appeared, and women from two women, one from each tribe or one tribe, but they say tribes, so I'm assuming two different tribes. One woman each marries their sons, and the lineage comes.
Yeah.
But did did God say, well, because, I feel sorry you guys are ousted and everything. I'm going to zap these tribes in real quick and make them up to the age so you guys can have a future.
So my buddy's gonna trip out
That,
when he hears this episode. Cause earlier I told you I was like, me and my coworker were just talking about that last week. And then what you said right now, like it's like you're quoting him. What he was saying literally about the other tribes. He brought up the exact same thing, the exact same way you said it in the exact order. So that's kind of wild.
yeah, I mean, there are so many clues that the story has been so altered, but they never paid attention to it because here's the reality of how they got away with this in the beginning. Who, when Christianity started and the Bible was first written, who were the only people that could read the book and tell you what the book says?
Who's that?
The priests.
The priests?
You could not, as a, let's say, lord or peasant, you were not allowed to have the Bible in your possession until later when the Reformation came around and it was translated from Latin into other languages. It was kept in Latin so that only the priests and the bishops and the archbishops and the pope could tell you what the book said because they're the only ones that were educated to know what the book said.
Or alter it to, fit what they want you to know it says.
Right. And, that's another example is, the book can say, Matthew slaughtered the lamb when the grape fields were in bloom. Well, lambs may not be out when grapes are growing on the vines, and so how can that be? And a guest who I think you would enjoy talking with, he has a 90-minute presentation to where he literally takes and shows you the Bible is written in zodiac code. And so the sheep or ram that I mentioned, that could be the zodiac sign. The grapes, well, that could be associated to this zodiac by referencing it in those terms, that
Yeah.
it's only grows in this time frame. So when you start to see the code and understand the code, then all of a suddenly this text takes a whole nother, vision. And man, that would be Aquarius, I believe, is the correlation there of the zodiac to text. But Micah Dank, he is phenomenal. He's a Mason, um, Freemason, and he studies it. And he just, when he shows you how it's all mapped out, and he'll show you how almost line for line these
Yeah.
stories are encoded data, and it's like when you see it you can't unsee it. It's like it just makes the picture so make sense because, like, shepherds tending their field in December when Christ is born makes no sense because sheep are not in the fields in the winter.
Yeah.
They graze in the summer. So that's an impossibility by nature. But if you look at it coded by the zodiacs, it makes total sense. And so it's amazing. And I'm going to see if I can't get him back on to do another presentation, like a further presentation on it. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to deep dive and understand the Bible in a way that makes the Bible make sense, Otherwise, these stories don't make sense. Like the timing just doesn't work if you understand nature. He is a phenomenal source that'll help you make sense out of what you're confused about and doesn't make sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to check out his you said you interviewed him previously?
Yes.
I'll have to check that episode out.
Yeah, and I'll send it to you. And it's amazing when we look at everything, around us and we look at it for what it is, how our world can, make more sense. Like, we look at, we're living in an age where, people say the government or these the elitists, if you want to call them that, are pulling the wool over our eyes and we just don't see it. How can that be? Well, when you stop and you look at all these past thousands of years history that we blindly accept and don't challenge, you can see how it's possible and how they get away with it. But now that we're starting to look at it and go, this doesn't make sense. Well, it makes sense by this method, or it makes sense by this. Well, why would they do this? Well, you step back and you look at it and go, well, that's a great control mechanism.
Yeah.
Or that's a great way to keep people, dumbed down because they don't understand this code and they'll just, you can make them feel stupid by telling them, what do you mean the sheep, and went in the December aren't out? Do you know that? Are you a shepherd? And, people are like, well, no, I guess they could be. And, you start to believe that, he was born in December when by the nature of the book, he was born in July or June. And it's just, the world we're in is waking up with us. And to me, the way I view it is the world has had enough of this control mechanism
Yeah.
type reality and is like, I'm putting the truth out there. You're going to see it, whether you believe it or not. It's being put out there. And that's the disclosure
Yeah.
is we're seeing the truth of what's around us, then we accept it or we choose not to.
Yeah.
And we make our own truths. And so I can have the truth that the Bible is a complete work of fiction and it's all just encoded data and it's just meant to, you know, relay history in a, coded method. And you could say it's a great example of, how to live life. And somebody else can view it as going, this is what's telling me I cannot do because I don't want to do wrong. Well, all three versions of the same book are the correct. It's our perception and thoughts that's changing, and whether we allow it to change or not, that's the disclosure.
Yeah.
Is and so that's why I say disclosure is already here, it's already happening, but people want it a specific way so they don't see it.
The UFO landing on the White House lawn. I mean, I'm all up, I'm all for the disclosure, and it's funny because you had mentioned the UFO landing and all that, and the peaceful, hi, we're so and so, we come in peace. But then I always think back to that movie when Mars Attacks, when they let the dove
Yeah.
out and they're like, they just start taking everybody out. Hopefully, it's not one of those disclosures.
Well, and even still, I mean, look at, you could easily make an argument for the flip side of if a UFO was to try and land on the White House lawn, it would be obliterated.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, for
They're
sure.
they're not gonna allow that thing to land without, some communication in advance. And so, they're as much in danger of being attacked during first contact as we are by them. And so it's like we have this mutual strategy of, who's going to attack who first. And the saddest reality is we've been programmed that if an alien comes out and says, I come in peace, kill it because that's what happens in the movies Hollywood has put out.
Yeah.
Aliens will say, we come in peace, and then they take us over. And it's like, but they said they came in peace.
And
So we're taught, don't trust that statement.
do you think it's purposely put out that way for people
I
to
think
react like
so.
that?
I absolutely think so. I think it's part of Project Bluebeam that's been going on and is a huge part of, the whole false flag operation of it. And I know that term false flag has many connotations now thanks to mainstream media, but
Yeah,
false flags, what it really comes down to is one person creating a narrative over what everybody else has seen and making everyone believe one narrative is the narrative. And so that's where I think the false flag issues come into play and why some of these programs are still able to operate is because they convince us, oh, they've been shut down. They're no longer in existence. When in reality, they just changed the name and said, oh, well, like Project Bluebeam, they may say that operation has, been canceled. We're not doing a Project Bluebeam. Well, let us now introduce the Purple Stallion program.
yeah,
And you're like, well, what's the Purple Stallion program? Well, we have this technology where we can do this. And you could sit there and go, well, isn't that Project Bluebeam? And they're going to be like, no, no, it's totally different. But it's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And so people are going to go, oh, it's a different name. It's a different program. Okay. And they'll get away with it that way because nobody really looks at and pays attention to what the details are. What does it mean? What is it doing? We just look at it and go, okay, it's not the same, so we're good. And we let our guards down.
yeah. I get what you're saying. Well, you want to go ahead and set up for part two of this?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Yeah, I know I got some things I got to do. Get my part of the house situated. I was just
Yeah,
waiting,
I gotta go check on a friend of mine and see how they're doing.
man. But this was a really good conversation. I did not expect for it to go down this route, and
I
I'm
know
glad.
we were talking about a whole different show, like literally
Yeah,
before we went live, and we went live and it went somewhere completely different.
yeah. I love that though. I mean, that was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Yeah, I'm glad, that you create the safe space to have those type of conversations.
I appreciate it. So before you leave, where can everybody reach out to you to check out all your material? Where can they buy your books? All five of them.
So my books are available at Amazon.com. You just search my name, Michael Kopf, and it should have my picture. And if it doesn't have the awakening or deeper insights, you're on the wrong Michael Kopf. But when I look on Amazon, I don't come across a different one, so it should be pretty easily there and easy to find. And you can find me on Facebook. I'm on TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Spotify with my shows. YouTube. I have my shows there and on Rumble as well. And I'm on Etalk as the Melted Broadcast is as well. So I am so blessed to be a part of that program. And I give a huge shout out to Jeff about Etalk because he has put together and kept it going this network of individuals of different backgrounds. And I miss the radio, but I
I do
don't
too.
miss the radio because it
Well,
was
you were,
cool.
yeah, you went live on it though, right?
I would be live on it, and it
Yeah,
was cool to hear, but yeah, it's a lot of work to run a radio station, and so I am excited to see what eTalk is getting into and morphing into and being a part of it. And I am glad that you are back as well, so you can be a part of it as well. And
yeah,
yeah, and so I mean, again, my shows that I host are The Energy That Surrounds Us on Tuesday nights. Wednesday nights is Riding Through the Unknown. And Tuesday afternoons, every other week, I have now a special on The Energy That Surrounds Us, which is Channeling with Starseed Lolo. And once a month, currently on Riding Through the Unknown on a Thursday night, is live medium readings with Tammy Christine. And so I am so excited to be bringing new material and new type of shows as well. And so I'm continuing to evolve my channels and create new content, new material for everyone. And I will say I got two more books in the works, and then I haven't decided if I'm going to keep writing books or some people have suggested writing a screenplay, and others
yeah.
have suggested going and learning how to do audiobooks and taking the books that I have and make them audio versions.
People say that I'm one of the greats, I'm the one that you love to hate. Shake 'em up like a quake, pop your feelings and turn and dispose them like haters I throw away. I'm forever blessed, got the spirit that's wholly controlling me, I ain't gotta coordinate. I just sit back and buckle my bills and I'm ready to blaze in the stars of my destination. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open